This is the Michael Myers version of Grimm's Fairy Tales. The 12 Dancing Princesses. Once upon a time there was a king who had 12 daughters, each more beautiful than the other. They slept together in a hall where their beds stood close to one another. At night, when they had gone to bed, the king locked the door and bolted it. But when he unlocked it in the morning, he noticed that their shoes had been danced to pieces, and nobody could explain how it happened. So the king sent out a proclamation saying that anyone who could discover where the princesses did their night's dancing might choose one of them to be his wife, and should reign after his death. But whoever presented himself and failed to make the discovery after 3 days and nights was to forfeit his life. A prince soon appeared and offered to take the risk. He was well received, and the knight was taken into a room adjoining the hall where the princesses slept. His bed was made up there, and he was to watch and see where they went to dance. And so that they could not do anything or leave without being seen, the door of the room was left open. But the eyes of the prince grew heavy, and he fell asleep. When he woke up in the morning, all 12 princesses had been dancing, but the soles of their shoes were full of holes. The second and third evenings passed with the same result. The prince was then granted no mercy, and Michael Myers cut his head off with the chef's knife. The end. The Golden Bird. A long time ago there was a king who had a lovely pleasure garden around his palace, and in it stood a tree which bore golden apples. When the apples were nearly ripe, they were counted, but the very next morning one was missing. This was reported to the king, and he ordered a watch to be set every night under the tree. The king had 3 sons, and he sent the eldest into the garden at nightfall. But by midnight he was overcome with sleep, and in the morning after another apple was missing. On the following night the second son had to keep watch, but he fared no better. The clock struck 12, he too was fast asleep, and in the morning another apple was gone. The turn to watch now came to the third son. He was quite ready, but the king had not much confidence in him, and thought that he would accomplish even less than his brothers. At last, however, he gave permission, so the youth lay down under the tree to watch, determined not to let sleep master him. As the clock struck 12, there was a rustling in the air, and by the light of the moon he saw a bird whose shining feathers were pure gold. The bird settled on the tree and was just plucking an apple when the young prince shot an arrow at it. The bird flew away, but the arrow hit its plumage, and one of the golden feathers fell to the ground. The prince picked it up, and in the morning he took it to the king and told him all that he had seen in the night. The king assembled his council, and everybody declared that a feather like that was worth more than the whole kingdom. "If the feather is worth so much," said the king, "one will not satisfy me. I must and will have the whole bird." So at this point, Michael Myers steps up and walks out of the building, finds a golden bird, and kills it. The end. The 3 Spinning Fairies. There once was upon a time a girl who was lazy and hated work, and nothing her mother could say would induce her to spin. At last the mother grew angry, and losing all patience with her, gave her a beating. At this the girl began to cry so loudly that the queen, who was driving past at the time, heard her cries and stopped. She went into the house and asked the mother why she was beating her daughter like that. Her screams, she said, can be heard outside in the street. The mother was ashamed to confess the truth about her daughter's laziness, and so she answered, I cannot get her to leave off spinning. She is forever at her wheel, and I am too poor to keep on buying her fresh flax. When this lie became apparent, Michael Myers stepped out from beyond the shadows and killed them with his chef's knife. The end. The Three Children of Fortune. Once upon a time, a father sent for his 3 sons and gave to the eldest a cock, to the second a scythe, and to the third a cat. I am now old, said he. My end is approaching, and I would fain provide for you before I die. Money I have none, and what I give you seems of little worth. It rests with yourselves alone to turn my gifts into good account. Only seek out a land where what you have is still unknown, and your fortune is made. But before they could go, Michael Myers stepped out of a closet and killed everybody. King Thrushbeard. There was once a king who had a daughter. She was more beautiful than words can tell, but at the same time so proud and haughty that no man who came to woo her was good enough for her. She turned away one after another, and even mocked them. One day her father ordered a great feast to be given, and invited to it all the marriageable young men from far and near. They were all placed in a row according to their rank and position. First came kings, then princes, then dukes, then earls, and barons, and finally Michael Myers. The princess was led through the ranks, but she had some fault to find with all of them. One was too stout. That barrel, she said. The next was too tall. Long and lean is no good. The third was too short. Short and stout, can't turn about. The fourth was too white, pale as death. The fifth was too red, turkey cock. The sixth was not straight, oven dried. And the seventh was wearing a William Shatner mask and carrying a giant chef's knife. She said, "Oh, not a big enough knife." Michael Myers was insulted and killed the girl in front of her father. The end. The 12 Brothers. Once upon a time there lived a king and a queen very peacefully together. They had 12 children, all boys. Now the king said to the queen one day, "If our 13th child should be a girl, the 12 boys shall die, so that her riches may be the greater and the kingdom fall to her alone." Then she caused 12 coffins to be made, and they were filled with shavings and a little pillow laid in each, and they were brought and put into a locked-up room. And the king gave the key to the queen and told her to say nothing about it to anyone. But the mother sat the whole day sorrowing, so that her youngest son, who never left her, and to whom she had given the biblical name Benjamin, said to her, "Dear mother, why are you so sad?" "Dearest child," answered she, "I dare not tell you." But he let her have no peace until she went and unlocked the room and showed him the 12 coffins with the shavings and the little pillows. Then she said, "My dear Benjamin, your father has caused these coffins to be made for you and your 11 brothers. And if I bring a little girl into the world, you are all to be put to death together and buried therein." At this point, Michael Myers appeared out from behind one of the caskets and killed the queen, therefore ending any chance of a girl being born. The end. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Once upon a time, a mouse and a bird and a sausage lived and kept house together in perfect peace among themselves, and in great prosperity. It was the bird's business to fly to the forest every day and bring back wood. The mouse had to draw the water, make the fire, and set the table, and the sausage had to do the cooking. Nobody is content in this world. Much will have more. One day the bird met another bird on the way and told him of his excellent condition in life. But the other bird called him a poor simpleton to do so much work while the other two led easy lives at home. So when the mouse had made up her fire and drawn water, she went to rest in her little room until it was time to lay the cloth. The sausage stayed by the saucepans, looked to it that the victuals were well cooked, and just before dinner time he stirred the broth or the stew 3 or 4 times well around himself, so as to enrich and season and flavor it. Then the bird used to come home and lay down his load, and they sat down at the table, and after a good meal they would go to bed and sleep their fill to the next morning. It was really a most satisfactory life, until Michael Myers showed up and killed all of them in their sleep. The end. The Wolf and the 7 Kids. There once was an old nanny goat who had 7 kids, and she was just as fond of them as a mother is of her children. One day she was going into the woods to fetch some food for them. So she called them up to her and said, "My dear children, I'm going out into the woods. Beware of the wolf. If once he gets into the house, he will eat you up, skin and hair and all. The rascal often disguises himself, but you will know him by his rough voice and his black feet." The kids said, "Oh, we will be very careful, dear mother. You'll be quite happy about us." Bleating tenderly, the old goat went off to her work. Before long, someone knocked at the door, but said nothing. They opened the door, and it was Michael Myers. He killed all of the kids before the mother had returned. Pretty soon, there was another knock at the door, and it was the old wolf. But there was no one left to kill, so he simply ate the dead kids. The end. An honest husbandman once upon a time had a son born to him who was no bigger than my thumb, and who for many years did not grow 1 hair's breadth taller. One day, as the father was going to plow in his field, the little fellow said, "Father, let me go too." "No," said his father, "stay where you are. You can do no good out of doors, and if you go, perhaps I may lose you." At this point, Michael Myers burst through the door and killed the tiny Thumbling the dwarf. His father was so distraught, but Michael Myers killed him too, and therefore there was no one left to furrow the fields. And they went fallow. The end. Sweetheart Roland. Once upon a time there was a woman who was a real witch, and she had 2 daughters. One was ugly and wicked, but she loved her because she was her own daughter. The other was good and lovely, but she hated her, for she was an only foster child. Now this foster child had a beautiful apron, which the other daughter envied, and she said to her mother that she must have it. "Just wait quietly, my child," said her mother. "You shall have it. Tonight when she is asleep, I will go and chop off your sister's head. Only take care to lie on the farther side of the bed against the wall, and push her well to this side." Now all this would certainly have come to pass if the poor girl had not been standing in a corner and heard what they said. She went to Michael Myers and told him all about what was going on. Now in the middle of the night the witch crept up holding an axe in her right hand, while with her left she felt to find if anyone was there. However, Michael Myers was in the shadows of the room. He seized the axe with both hands and got it away from the witch. Then he cut the witch's throat with his chef's knife, and for good measure, he killed both of the sisters. The end. The Goose Girl. There was once an old queen whose husband had been dead for many years, and she had a very beautiful daughter. When she grew up, she was betrothed to a prince in a distant country. When the time came for the maiden to be sent into this distant country to be married, the old queen packed up quantities of clothes and jewels, gold and silver, cups and ornaments, and in fact everything suitable to a royal outfit, for she loved her daughter very dearly. She also sent a waiting woman to travel with her, and to put her hand into that of the bridegroom. They each had a horse. The princess's horse was called Falada, and it could speak. When the hour of departure came, the old queen went to her bedroom, and with a sharp little knife cut her finger and made it bleed. Then she held a piece of white cambric under it, and let 3 drops of blood fall on it. This cambric she gave to her daughter, and said, "Dear child, take good care of this. It will stand you in good stead on the journey." However, the journey was not to be so successful, because Michael Myers showed up, and despite the cambric with the 3 drops of blood, he killed the girl, the princess, and everyone else around, so that there were no witnesses. The end. The Cat and Mouse in Partnership. A cat, having made acquaintance with a mouse, professed such great love and friendship for her that the mouse at last agreed that they should live and keep house together. "We must make provision for the winter," said the cat, "or we shall suffer hunger, and you, little mouse, must not stir out, or you will be caught in a trap." At this point Michael Myers came into the room, saw the cat and mouse, and sliced off both of their heads with his chef's knife. Now there was no reason for them to be in partnership or to worry about the winter. The end. The White Snake. A long time ago there lived a king whose wisdom was celebrated far and wide. Nothing was unknown to him, and the news of the most secret transactions seemed to reach him through the air. Now he had one very odd habit. Every day at dinner, when the courtiers had withdrawn and he was quite alone, a trusted servant had to bring in another dish. It was always covered. Even the servant did not know what it contained, nor anyone else, for the king never uncovered it till he was alone. This had gone on for a long time, when one day the servant who carried the dish was overcome by his curiosity and took the dish to his own room. When he had carefully locked the door, he took the cover off the dish and saw a white snake lying in it. At the sight of it, he could not resist tasting it, so he cut off a piece and put it into his mouth. Hardly had he tasted it, however, when he heard a wonderful whispering of delicate voices. He went to the window and listened, and he noticed that the whispers came from the sparrows outside. They were chattering away and telling each other all kinds of things that they had heard in the woods and fields. Eating the snake had given him the power of understanding the language of birds and animals. Too bad it was not to last, because in the same room there was a standing wardrobe, and the doors burst open. Michael Myers came out and killed the man, and the king never got his white snake that night. The end. The Frog Prince. In the old times, when it was still of some use to wish for the thing one wanted, there lived a king whose daughters were all handsome, but the youngest was so beautiful that the sun himself, who had seen so much, wondered at her beauty each time he shone over her. Near the royal castle there was a great dark wood, and in the wood under an old linden tree was a well. When the day was hot, the king's daughter used to go forth into the wood and sit by the brink of the cool well. And if the time seemed long, she would take out a golden ball and throw it up and catch it again, And this was her favorite pastime. But it was not to last, because Michael Myers showed up and slit her throat and took the golden ball. He threw it down the well. Who needs a golden ball? The end. The Pink. There was once a queen who had not been blessed with children. She prayed every morning as she walked in her garden that a son or daughter might be given to her. Then one day an angel came and said to her, "Be content, you shall have a son, and he shall be endowed with the power of wishing, so that whatsoever he wishes for shall be granted to him." She hurried to the king and told him the joyful news. When the time came, a son was born to them, and they named it Michael Myers. Now, every morning the queen used to take her little son into the garden where the wild animals were kept, to bathe him in a clear sparkling fountain, after he had killed another wild animal with his little knife. It happened one day when the child was a little older that as she sat with him on her lap, she fell asleep. At this point, Michael Myers killed the woman and left the house with his signature chef's knife that he found in the kitchen. And he lived happily ever after. The end. The Queen Bee. Two kings' sons once started to seek adventures, and they fell into a wild, reckless way of living and gave up all thoughts of going home again. Their third and youngest brother, who was called Whitling, had remained behind, and now he started off to seek them. When at last he found them, they jeered at his simplicity in thinking that he could make his way in the world when they were so much cleverer, but were unsuccessful. At this point, Michael Myers came out from the woods, and he killed all of them. Stupid argument anyway. The end. Briar Rose, also known as Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago, there lived a king and a queen who every day said, "If only we had a child," but for a long time they had none. It happened once as the queen was bathing that a frog crept out of the water onto the land and said to her, "Your wish shall be fulfilled. Before a year has passed, you shall bring a daughter into the world." The frog's words came true. The queen had a little girl who was so beautiful that the king could not contain himself for joy, and he prepared a great feast. He invited his relatives, friends, and acquaintances, and also the fairies, in order that they might favorably and kindly dispose towards the child. There were 13 of them in the kingdom, but as the king had only 12 golden plates for them to eat from, one of the fairies had no plate. At this point, Michael Myers came in and killed the 13th fairy. Thus, there were no need for a 13th plate. And the dinner went on as usual, and everyone lived happily ever after. The end. The Six Swans. Once upon a time, a king was hunting in a great wood, and he pursued a wild animal so eagerly that none of his people could follow him. When evening came, he stood still. Then looking around him, he found that he had lost his way, and seeking a path, he found none. Then all at once, he saw Michael Myers coming up to him, and he killed him with his chef's knife. Not lost anymore. The end. The Fisherman and His Wife. There once was a fisherman who lived with his wife in a miserable little hovel close to the sea. He went to fish every day, and he fished, and at last one day, as he was sitting Looking deep down into the shining water, he felt something on the line. When he hauled it up, there was Michael Myers, who pulled out his chef's knife and killed the fisherman, and then sunk the boat and swam away. The end. Rumpelstiltskin. There was once a miller who was very poor, but he had a beautiful daughter. Now it once happened that he had occasion to speak with the king, and in order to give himself an air of importance, he said, "I have a daughter who can spin gold out of straw." The king said to the miller, "This is an art in which I am much interested. If your daughter is as skillful as you say she is, bring her to my castle tomorrow, and I will put her to the test." Accordingly, when the girl was brought to the castle, the king conducted her to a chamber which was quite full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a reel, and said, "Now set to work, and if between tonight and tomorrow at dawn you have not spun this straw into gold, you must die." Thereupon he carefully locked the chamber door, and she remained alone. There sat the unfortunate miller's daughter, and for the life of her did not know what to do. She had not the least idea how to spin straw into gold, and she became more and more distressed until at last she began to weep. Then all at once the door sprang open, and in stepped Michael Myers, who killed her with his chef's knife, thus relieving her of her duties of spinning straw into gold. The end. Rapunzel. There once was a man and his wife who had long wished in vain for a child, and at last they had reason to hope that heaven would grant their wish. There was a little window at the back of their house which overlooked a beautiful garden full of lovely flowers and shrubs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and nobody dared to enter it, because it belonged to a powerful witch who was feared by everybody. One day the woman, standing at this window and looking into the garden, saw a bed planted with beautiful rampion. It looked so fresh and green that she longed to eat some of it. This longing increased every day, and as she knew it could never be satisfied, she began to look pale and miserable, and to pine away. Then her husband was alarmed and said, "What ails you, my dear wife?" "Alas," she said, "if I cannot get any of the rampion to eat from the garden behind our house, I shall die." And as it turned out, Michael Myers came out of the closet, and he killed her with his chef's knife. She was right. Without any rampion, she was going to die. The end. The Salad. There was once a merry young huntsman who went into the forest to hunt. He was gay and light-hearted, and whistled a tune upon a leaf as he went along. Suddenly an ugly old crone spoke to him and said, "Good morning, dear huntsman. You are merry and happy enough, while I am hungry and thirsty. Pray give me an alms." The huntsman pitied the poor old woman, put his hand in his pocket, and made her a present according to his means. Then he wanted to go on, but the old woman held him back, and said, "Hark ye, dear huntsman, I will make you a present because of your good heart. Go on your way, and you will come to a tree on which 9 birds are sitting. They will have a cloak in their claws over which they are fighting. Take aim with your gun and shoot into the middle of them. They will drop the cloak, and one of the birds will fall down dead. Take the cloak with you. It is a wishing cloak. When you throw it around your shoulders, you only have to wish yourself at a place to be there at once. Take the heart out of the dead bird and swallow it whole. Then you will find a gold coin under your pillow every single morning when you wake." Michael Myers overheard this entire conversation and took it upon himself to shoot at the golden bird. Now, when they dropped the cloak, the wishing cloak, he put that on himself and wished himself everywhere he wanted to go to kill somebody. The end. The Bremen town musicians. A certain man had an ass which for many years carried sacks to the mill without tiring. At last, however, its strength was worn out, and it was no longer of any use for work. Accordingly, its master began to ponder as to how best to cut down its keep. But the ass, seeing there was a mischief in the air, ran away and started on the road to Bremen. There he thought he could become a town musician. When he had been traveling a short time, he fell in with a hound who was lying panting on the road as though he had run himself off his legs. "Well, what are you panting so for, Growler?" said the ass. "Ah," said the hound, "just because I am old and every day I get weaker, and also because I can no longer keep up with the pack. My master wanted to kill me, so I took my departure. But now how am I to earn my bread?" "Do you know what?" said the ass. "I am going to Bremen, and shall become a town musician. Come with me, and take your part in the music. I shall play the lute, and you shall beat the kettle drum." The hound agreed, and they went on. A short time afterwards they came upon a cat sitting in the road, with a face as long as a wet week. "Well, why are you so cross, Whiskers?" asked the ass. "Who can be cheerful when he is out at elbows?" "Who can be cheerful when he is out at elbows?" said the cat. "I am getting on in years, and my teeth are blunted, and I prefer to sit by the stove and purr instead of hunting around after mice. Just because of this my mistress wanted to drown me. I made myself scarce, but now I don't know where to turn." "Come with us to Bremen," said the ass. "You are a great hand at serenading, so you can become a town musician." The cat consented and joined them. Next the fugitives passed by a yard where a barnyard fowl was sitting on the door, crowing with all its might. "You crow so loud you pierce one through and through," said the ass. "What is the matter?" "Why didn't I prophesy fine weather for the Lady Day, when Our Lady washes the Christ child's little garment and wants to dry it? But notwithstanding this, because Sunday visitors are coming tomorrow, the mistress has no pity, and she has ordered the cook to make me into a soup. Shall I have my neck wrung tonight? Now I am crowing with all my might while I can." "Come along, Redcomb," said the ass. "You had much better come with us. We are going to Bremen, and you will find a much better fate there. You have a good voice, and when we make music together, there will be quality in it." Except it was not to be, because as the band had gotten all together, Michael Myers showed up and killed them all, and had himself a nice little feast. The end. The Raven. There once was a queen who had a little daughter still in arms. One day the child was naughty and would not be quiet, whatever her mother might say. When she grew impatient, and as the ravens were flying round the castle, she opened the window and said, "I wish you were a raven and you might fly away, then I should have peace." She had hardly said the words when the child was changed into a raven and flew out the window. She flew straight into a dark wood, and her parents did not know what had become of her. One day a man was passing through this wood and heard the raven calling. When he was near enough, the raven said, "I am a princess by birth, and I am bewitched, but you can deliver me from the spell." The man, it turns out, was Michael Myers, and killed the raven and had himself a nice little dinner that night. The end. Cinderella. The wife of a rich man fell ill, and when she felt that she was nearing her end, she called her only daughter to her bedside and said, "Dear child, continue devout and good, then God will always help you, and I will look down upon you from heaven and watch over you." Thereupon she closed her eyes and breathed her last. The maiden went to her mother's grave every day and wept, and she continued to be devout and good. When the winter came, the snow spread a white covering on the grave, and when the sun of spring had unveiled it again, the husband took another wife. The new wife brought home with her 2 daughters, who were fair and beautiful to look upon. but base and black at heart. Then began a sad time for the unfortunate stepchild. A good time for the two daughters who were fair and beautiful, because they were into heavy metal. Now, the sisters did not like their stepchild. "Is this stupid goose to sit with us in the parlor?" they said. "Whoever wants to eat bread must earn it. Go and sit with the kitchen maid." They took away her pretty clothes and made her put on an old gray frock and gave her wooden clogs. "Just look at the proud princess, how well she's dressed," they laughed, and led her to the kitchen. In the kitchen, Michael Myers was standing there and killed them all. The end. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time in the middle of winter, when the snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky, a queen sat at her window working, and her embroidery frame was of ebony. As she worked, gazing at times out on the snow, she pricked her finger, and there fell from it 3 drops of blood on the snow. And when she saw how bright and red it looked, she said to herself, "Oh, that I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the embroidery frame." Not long afterwards, she had a daughter, with a skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. And she was named Snow White, and when she was born, the queen died. After a year had gone by, the king took another wife, a beautiful woman, but proud and overbearing, and she could not bear to be surpassed in beauty by anyone. She had a magic looking glass, and she used it to stand before it and look in it and say, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And the looking glass would answer, "Michael Myers is right behind you." She turned around, and Michael killed her with the chef's knife. The end. The Elves and the Shoemaker. There once was a shoemaker who, through no fault of his own, had become so poor that at last he had only leather enough for 1 pair of shoes. At evening he cut off the shoes which he intended to begin upon the next morning. But since he had a good conscience, he lay down quietly, said his prayers, and fell asleep. In the morning, when he had said his prayers and was preparing to sit down to work, he found the pair of shoes standing finished on the table. He was amazed and could not understand it in the least. He took the shoes in his hand to examine them more closely. They were so neatly sewn that not a stitch was out of place, and were as good as work as a master hand. The work of a master hand. Soon afterwards a purchaser came in, and as he was much pleased with the shoes, he paid more than the ordinary price for them, so that the shoemaker was able to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes with the money. He cut them out in the evening, and the next day, with fresh courage, was about to go to work. But he had no need to, for when he got up, the shoes were finished, and buyers were not lacking. They gave him so much money that he was able to buy leather for 4 pairs of shoes. Early next morning he found the 4 pairs finished, and so it went on. What he cut out at evening was finished in the morning, so that he was soon again in comfortable circumstances, and became a well-to-do man. Now it happened one evening not long before Christmas, when he had cut out some of the shoes as usual, that his wife said to him, "How would it be if we were to sit up tonight to see who it is that lends us such a helping hand?" The wife agreed, and lighted a candle, and they hid themselves in the corner of the room behind the clothes which were hanging there. At midnight came 2 little naked men, who sat down at the shoemaker's table, took up the cut-out work, and began with their tiny fingers to stitch, sew, and hammer so neatly and quickly that the shoemaker could not believe his eyes. They did not stop until everything was quite finished and stood complete on the table. Then they swiftly ran away. The next day the wife said, "The little men have made us rich, and we ought to show our gratitude. They were running about with nothing on, and must freeze with cold. Now I will make them little shirts, coats, waistcoats, and hose, and will even knit them a pair of stockings, and you shall make them each a pair of shoes. The husband agreed, and at evening, when they had everything ready, they laid out the presents on the table and hid themselves to see how the little men would behave. At midnight they came skipping in, and were about to set to work, but instead of the leather ready to cut out, they found the charming little clothes. At first they were surprised, then excessively delighted. With the greatest speed they put on and smoothed down the pretty clothes, singing, "Now we're boys so fine and neat, why cobble more for others' feet?" Well, at this point, Michael Myers stepped out from the shadows, killed the little elves, and then killed the shoemaker and his wife for being spies. The end. The Water of Life. There once was a king who was so ill that it was thought impossible his life could be saved. He had 3 sons, and were all in great distress on his account. And then they went into the castle gardens and wept at the thought that he must die. An old man came up to them and asked the cause of their grief. They told him that their father was dying and nothing could save him. Michael Myers overheard this conversation and went up into the castle. He killed the old king, took him out of his misery. The end. The Gallant Tailor. One summer morning, a little tailor was sitting at his bench near the window, working cheerfully with all his might, when an old woman came down the street. She was crying, "Good jelly to sell! Good jelly to sell!" The cry sounded pleasant in the little tailor's ears, so he put his head out the window and called out, "Here, my good woman, come here if you want a customer." So the poor woman climbed the steps with her heavy basket, and was obliged to unpack and display all of her pots to the tailor. He looked at every one of them, and lifting all the lids, applied his nose to each. At last he said, "The jelly seems pretty good. You may weigh me out 4 half-ounces, or I don't mind having a 1/4 pound." The woman, who had expected to find a good customer, gave him what he asked for, but went off angry and grumbling. "This jelly is the very thing for me," cried the little tailor. "It would give me strength and cunning." And he took down the bread from the cupboard, cut a big slice off of the loaf, and spread the jelly on it, laid it near him, and went on stitching more gallantly than ever. All the while the scent of the sweet jelly was spreading throughout the room, where there were quantities of flies. They were attracted by it and flew down to eat of it. "Now then, who invited you here?" said the tailor, and drove the unbidden guests away. But the flies, not understanding his language, were not to be got rid of like that, and returned in larger numbers than before. With them came Michael Myers, who used his chef's knife to slice open all the flies and kill them in an amazing display of knife work. The Golden Goose. There once was a man who had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called Simpleton. He was scorned and despised by the others and kept in the background. The eldest son was going into the forest to cut wood, and before he started, his mother gave him a nice sweet cake and a bottle of wine to take with him, so he might not suffer from hunger or thirst. In the wood he met a little old gray man, who bade him good day and said, "Give me a bit of the cake in your pocket, and let me have a drop of your wine. I am so hungry and thirsty." But the clever son said, "If I give you my cake and wine, I shan't have enough for myself. Be off with you." At that point Michael Myers came out and killed the old man, and he also killed the son for being such an idiot. The end. The Blue Light. There once was a soldier who had served his king well and faithfully for many years. but on account of his many wounds he could serve no longer. The king said, "You can go home now. I have no further need for you, and I can only pay those who serve me." At this point, Michael Myers came out of the closet and stabbed the man with his knife. And therefore, he had nothing left to live for, because he was dead. The end. The straw, the coal, and the bean. Once there was a poor old woman who lived in a village. She had collected a bundle of beans and was going to cook them. So she prepared a fire on her hearth, and to make it burn up quickly, she lighted it with a handful of straw. When she threw the beans into the pot, one escaped her unnoticed and slipped onto the floor, where it lay by a straw. Soon afterwards, a glowing coal jumped out of the fire and joined the others. Then the straw began and said, "Little friends, how did you come here?" The coal answered, "I will have happily escaped the fire, and if I had not done so by force of will, my death would certainly have been a most cruel one. I should have been burnt to a cinder." The bean said, "I have also escaped so far with a whole skin, but if the old woman had put me into the pot, I should have been pitilessly boiled down to broth like my comrades." At this point, Michael Myers showed up, killed the bean, broke the coal under his foot, and snapped the straw in half. Then he and the old woman sat down and had a delicious bean soup. The end. Fundevogel. There once was a forester who went into the woods to hunt, and he heard a cry like that of a little child. He followed the sound and at last came to a big tree where a tiny child was sitting high up on one of the top branches. The mother had gone to sleep under the tree, and a bird of prey, seeing the child on her lap, had flown down and carried it off in its beak to the top of the tree. The forester climbed the tree and brought down the child, thinking to himself, "I will take it home and bring it up with my own little Lena." But Michael Myers saw the whole thing, and realizing that the child was being abducted, he killed the child and the man, thus ending the kidnapping. The end. Carl Katz. In the midst of the Harz forests, there is a high mountain of which the neighbors tell all sorts of stories, how the goblins and fairies dance on it by night, and how the old Emperor Redbeard holds his court there and sits on his marble throne, with his long beard sweeping on the ground. A great many years ago there lived in a village at the foot of this mountain one Carl Katz. Now Carl was a goat herd, and every morning he drove his flocks to feed upon the green spots that are here and there found on the mountainside. In the evening he sometimes thought it too late to drive his charges home, so then he would shut them up in a spot in the woods where the old ruined walls of some castle that had long ago been there was deserted and left standing. They were high enough to form a fold in which he could count his goats and let them rest for the night. One evening he found that the prettiest goat of his flock, had vanished soon after they were driven into this fold. He searched everywhere for it in vain, but to his surprise and delight, when he counted his flock in the morning, what should he see but his lost goat? Again and again the same thing happened. At last he thought he would watch still more narrowly. And having looked carefully over the old walls, he found a narrow doorway through which it seemed that his favorite made her way. Carl followed and found a path leading downwards through a cleft in the rocks. On he went, scrambling as he could down the side of the rock, and at last he came to the mouth of a cave, where he lost sight of the goat. Just then he saw that his faithful dog was not with him. He whistled, but no dog was there. He was therefore forced to go into the cave and try to find his goat by himself. He groped his way for a little while, and at last came to the feeling of cloth. It turned out to be Michael Myers, who killed him and killed the goat, and there was nothing left to wonder about. The end. The table, the ass, and the stick. There was once an old tailor who had 3 sons and 1 goat, and as the goat nourished them all with her milk, she was obliged to have good food, and so she was led every day down to the willows by the waterside. And this business the sons did in turn. One day the eldest took the goat to the churchyard where the best sprouts are, that she might eat her fill and gambol about. In the evening, when it was time to go home, he said, "Well, goat, have you had enough?" The goat answered, "I am so full I cannot pull another blade of grass. Bah, bah." "Then come home," said the youth, and he fastened a string to her, led her to her stall, and fastened her up. "Now," said the tailor, "has the goat had her proper food?" "Oh," answered the son, "she is so full she can pull no more." But the father, wishing to see for himself, went out to the stall, stroked his dear goat, and said, "My dear goat, are you full?" And the goat answered, "How can I be full? There was nothing to pull, though I looked all about me. Bah, bah." "What is this I hear?" cried the tailor, and he ran and called out to the youth, "Oh, you liar, to say that the goat was full, and she was hungry all the time." In his wrath he took up his yardstick and drove his son out of the house with many blows. Michael Myers was standing outside. He killed the father with his chef's knife, then went into the barn and killed the lying goat, so the son would never have to be embarrassed by a lying goat ever again. Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there was a sweet little maiden who was loved by all who knew her, but she was especially dear to her grandmother, who did not know how to make enough of the child. Once she gave her a little red velvet cloak. It was so becoming, she liked it so much, that she would never wear anything else, so she got the name of Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come here, Red Riding Hood. Take this cake and bottle of wine to grandmother. She is weak and ill, and they will do her good. Go quickly before it gets hot. And don't loiter by the way, or run, or you will fall down and break the bottle, and there will be no wine for your grandmother. When you get there, don't forget to say, 'Good morning,' prettily, without staring about you." "I will do just as you tell me," Red Riding Hood promised her mother. Her grandmother lived away in the wood, a good half-hour from the village. When she got to the wood, she met a wolf. But Red Riding Hood did not know what a wicked animal he was, so she was not a bit afraid of him. "Good morning, Red Riding Hood," he said. "Good morning, Wolf," she answered. "Whither away so early, Red Riding Hood?" "To grandmother's." "What have you got in your basket?" "Cake and wine. We baked yesterday, and so I'm taking a cake to grandmother. She wants something to make her well." "Where does your grandmother live, Red Riding Hood?" "A good quarter of an hour farther into the wood. Her house stands under 3 big oak trees, near a hedge of nut trees, which you must know," said Red Riding Hood. The wolf thought, "This tender little creature will be a plump morsel. She will be nicer than the old woman. I must be cunning and snap them up." He walked along with Red Riding Hood for a while, and then all of a sudden Michael Myers came up behind them, and tapping the wolf on the shoulder, the wolf turned around, and Michael Myers sliced his neck open with the chef's knife. Red Riding Hood saw Michael kill the wolf, and in terror fled. Michael Myers chased after Red Riding Hood and killed her as well, and then went to the grandmother's house and killed the grandmother, and therefore nobody was hungry, nobody was sick. The end. The King of the Golden Mountain. There was once a merchant who had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They were both small and not old enough to run about. He also had 2 richly laden ships at sea, and just as he was expecting to make a great deal of money by the merchandise, news came that they had both been lost. So now, instead of being a rich man, he was quite poor, and had nothing left but one field near the town. To turn his thoughts from his misfortune, he went out into the field, as he was walking up and down, a little black mannequin suddenly appeared before him and asked why he was so sad. The merchant said, "I would tell you at once if you could perhaps help me." "Who knows?" answered the little mannequin. "Perhaps I could help you." Then the merchant told him that all of his wealth had been lost in a wreck, and that now he had nothing left but this field. "Don't worry yourself," said the mannequin. "If you will promise to bring me in 12 years' time the first thing which rubs against your legs when you go home, you shall have as much gold as you want." The merchant thought, what could it be but my dog? He never thought about his boy, but yes, he said, and gave the mannequin his bond and signed and sealed, and went home. When he reached the house, his little son, delighted to hold on to the benches and totter toward his father, seized him by the leg to steady himself. The merchant was horror-stricken, for his vow came into his head, and now he knew what he had promised to give away. But as he still found no gold in his chest, he thought it was only a joke of the mannequins. A month later he went up into the loft to gather together some old tin to sell it, and there he found a great heap of gold on the floor. So he was soon up in the world again. He bought and sold and became a richer merchant than ever, and was altogether contented. In the meantime the boy had grown up, and he was both clever and wise. But the nearer the end of the 12 years came, the more sorrowful the merchant grew. You could even see his misery in his face. One day his son asked him what was the matter, but his father would not tell him. The boy, however, persisted so long that at last he told him that he had promised, without knowing what he was doing, to give him up at the end of 12 years to a little black mannequin in return for a quantity of gold. He had given his hand and seal on it, and the time was now near for him to go. Then his son said, "Oh, father, don't be frightened. Michael Myers will show up and kill the little mannequin." When the time came, the son asked a blessing of the priest, and he and his father went to the field together, and the son made a circle within which they took their places. When the little black mannequin appeared, so did Michael Myers. Michael Myers killed the black mannequin, thus freeing the man from his obligation. But for creating this bond, signed and sealed in the first place, Michael Myers also killed the father and then the son, so that there would never be any further deceit, and Michael Myers took all the gold. Dan. The Robber Bridegroom. There was once a miller who had a beautiful daughter. When she grew up, he wanted to have her married and settled. He thought, if a suitable bridegroom comes and asks for my daughter, I will give her to him. Soon afterwards, a suitor came who appeared to be rich, and as the miller knew nothing against him, he promised his daughter to him. The maiden, however, did not like him as a bride ought to like her bridegroom, nor had she any faith in him. Whenever she looked at him or thought about him, a shudder came over her. One day he said to her, "You are my betrothed, and yet you have never been to see me." The maiden answered, "I don't even know where your house is." Then the bridegroom said, "My house is in the depths of the forest." She made excuses and said she could not find the way. The bridegroom answered, "Next Sunday you must come and see me without fail. I have invited some guests, and so that you may be able to find the way, I will strew some ashes to guide you." When Sunday came and the maiden was about to start, she was frightened, though she did not know why. So that she should be sure of finding her way back, she filled her pockets with peas and lentils. At the entrance to the forest, she found a track of ashes and followed it. But every step or two, she scattered a few peas right and left. She walked nearly the whole day, right into the midst of the forest, where it was almost dark. Here she saw a solitary house, which she did not like. It was so dark and dismal. She went in but found nobody, and there was dead silence. Suddenly a voice cried, turn back, thou bonny bride, nor in this house of death abide." The maiden looked up and saw that the voice came from a bird in the cage hanging on the wall. Once more it made the same cry, turn back, thou bonny bride, nor in this house of death abide." At this point, Michael Myers appeared from out of a closet. He killed the beautiful bride, thus denying the bridegroom his spoils of being a robber. Because he was a robber bridegroom, okay? The end. The turnip. There were once two brothers who had served as soldiers, and one was rich and the other was poor. The poor one wished to better himself, discarded his uniform and worked like a peasant. He dug and hoed his little field and sowed turnip seed. The seed came up, and one of the turnips grew to such an enormous size that it seemed as though it would never stop growing. It might have been called the Queen of Turnips, for its like had never been seen before, nor ever will again. At last it was so big that it filled a cart and needed 2 oxen to draw it. The peasant could not imagine that what would come of it, whether it would bring luck or bad. Good luck or bad luck. At last he said to himself, "If I sell it, what shall I gain? I might eat it, but the little turnips would do as well for that. The best thing would be to take it to the king and offer it to him." He loaded a cart, harnessed 2 oxen, and took it to the court to present to the king. "What is this extraordinary object?" said the king. "I have seen many marvels in my time, but never anything so remarkable as this. What seed did it spring from? Perhaps it belongs to you, especially if you are a child of good luck?" "Oh no," said the peasant. "Lucky I certainly am not, for I am a poor soldier who, since he could not keep himself no longer, hung up his uniform on a nail and now tills the earth. I have a brother who is rich and well known to you, my lord king, but I, because I have nothing, am forgotten by all the world." Then the king pitied him and said, "Your poverty shall be at an end, and you shall receive such Your poverty shall be at an end, and you shall receive such rich presents from me that your wealth will equal that of your brother." Thereupon he gave him plenty of gold, land, fields, and flocks, and enriched him with precious stones, so that the other brother's wealth could not be compared with his. And when the rich brother heard that his brother with a single turnip had acquired, he envied him and pondered how he might gain a like treasure for himself. But he wanted to show himself much cleverer, so he took gold and horses and presented them to the king, feeling certain that he would give him a far handsomer gift. For if his brother got so much for a turnip, what would he get for his beautiful things? The king took the present, saying that he could give him in return nothing or better than the huge turnip. So the rich brother had to put his brother's turnip into a cart and have it taken home. Then he did not know on whom to expend his wrath and bitterness, till evil thoughts came to him, and he determined to kill his brother. He hired murderers who were to place themselves in ambush. Then he went to his brother and said, "Dear brother, I know of a secret treasure which we will carry off and divide." The other agreed and went without suspicion. But when they reached the ambush, the murderers sprang upon him, found him, and prepared to hang him from a tree. At this point, Michael Myers appeared out of nowhere, killed the murderers, cut the rope from the tree, but then, in a strange turn of events, but not strange for Michael Myers, he killed everybody in the party, including the brothers, thus ending the turnip saga. The end. The 7 Ravens. There once was a man who had 7 sons, but never a daughter, however much he wished for one. At last, however, his wife gave him a daughter. His joy was great, but the child was small and delicate, and on account of its weakness it was to be christened at home. The father sent one of his sons in haste to the spring to fetch some water. The other 6 ran with him, and because each of them wanted to be the first to draw the water, the pitcher fell into the brook. Then they stood and didn't know what to do. Not one of them ventured to go home. And they did not come back. Their father became impatient and said, "Perhaps the young rascals are playing about and having forgotten it altogether." He became anxious lest his little girl should die unbaptized, and in hot vexation he cried, "I wish those youngsters would all turn into ravens." Scarcely were the words uttered when he heard a whirring in the air above his head, and looking upwards he saw 7 coal-black ravens flying away. Parents could not undo the spell and were very sad about the loss of their 7 sons, but they consoled themselves in some measure with their dear little daughter, who was soon to become strong and every day more beautiful. For a long time she was unaware that she had any brothers, and for her parents took care not to mention them to her. One day, however, by chance she heard some people saying about her, "Oh yes, the girl's pretty enough, but you know she was really to blame for the misfortune of her 7 brothers." Then she became very sad and went to her father and mother and asked if she had ever had any brothers, and what had become of them. The parents could no longer conceal the secret. They said, however, that what had happened was by the decree of heaven, and that her birth was merely the innocent occasion. But the little girl could not get the matter off her conscience for a single day, and she thought that she was bound to release her brothers again. She had no peace or quiet until she had secretly gone forth into the wide world to trace her brothers, wherever they might be, and to free them, let it cost what it might. She took nothing with her but a little ring as a remembrance of her parents, a loaf of bread against hunger, a pitcher of water against thirst, and a little chair in case of fatigue. She kept going on till she came to the end of the world. Then she came to the sun, but it was hot and terrible, and it devoured little children. She ran hastily away to the moon, but it was too cold and moreover dismal and dreary. And when the child was looking at it, it said, I smell man's flesh." Then she quickly made off and came to the stars, and they were all kind and good, and everyone sat on his own special seat. But the morning star stood up and gave her a little bone, and said, "Unless you have this bone, you cannot open the glass mountain, and in the glass mountain are your brothers." The girl took the bone and wrapped it up carefully in a little kerchief, and went on until she came to the great glass mountain. The gate was closed, and she meant to get out the little bone, but when she undid the kerchief, it was empty, and she had lost the good star's present. How now was she to set to work? She was determined to rescue her brothers, but she had no key to open the glass mountain. The good little sister took a knife and cut out her own tiny finger, fitting into the keyhole, and succeeded in opening the lock. Michael Myers, impressed with this feat of cutting off her own finger, killed the little girl so that she could not enter the glass mountain. Meanwhile, the ravens all lived a short life and died. The end. Tom Thumb. A poor peasant sat one evening by his hearth and poked the fire, while his wife sat opposite spinning. He said, "What a sad thing it is that we have no children. Our home is so quiet, while other folks' houses are noisy and cheerful." "Yes," answered his wife, and she sighed, "even if it were an only one, and even if it were no bigger than my thumb, I should be quite content. We would love it with all our hearts." Now, some time after this, she had a little boy who was strong and healthy, but was no bigger than a thumb. Then they said, "Well, our wish is fulfilled, and small as he is, we will love him dearly." And because of his tiny stature, they called him Tom Thumb. They let him want for nothing, yet still the child grew no bigger, but remained the same size as when he was born. Still he looked out on the world with intelligent eyes, and soon showed himself a clever and agile creature who was lucky in all he attempted. One day the peasant was preparing to go into the forest to cut wood, and said to himself, "I wish I had someone to bring the cart after me." "Oh, father," said Tom Thumb, "I will soon bring it. You leave it to me. It will be in the forest at the appointed time." Then the peasant laughed and said, "How can that be? You are much too small even to hold the reins." "That doesn't matter, if only mother will harness the horse," answered Tom. "I will sit in his ear and tell him where to go." "Very well," said the father. "We would try it for once." When the time came, the mother harnessed the horse, set Tom in his ear, and then the little creature called out, "Gee up!" and "Whoa!" in turn, and directed it where to go. It went quite well, just as though it were being driven by its master, and they went the right way to the wood. Now it happened that while the cart was turning a corner and Tom was calling to the horse, two strange men appeared on the scene. "My goodness," said one, "what is this? There goes the cart and the driver is calling to the horse, but there is nothing to be seen." When Tom spied his father, he said, "You see, father, here I am with the cart. Now lift me down." The father held the horse with his left hand and took a little sun out of his ear with the right. Then Tom sat down quite happily on a straw. When the two strangers noticed him, they did not know what to say for astonishment. The one drew the other aside and said, "Listen, that little creature might make our fortune if we were to show him in the town for money. We will buy him." So they went up to the peasant and said, "Sell us the little man. He shall be well looked after by us." "No," said the peasant. "He is the delight of my eyes, and I will not sell him for all the gold in the world." But Tom Thumb, when he heard of the bargain, crept up by the folds of his father's coat, placed himself on his shoulder, and whispered in his ear, "Father, let me go. I will soon come back again." Then his father gave him to the two men for a fine piece of gold. "Where will you sit?" they asked him. "Oh, just put me on the brim of your hat. Then I can walk up and down and observe the neighborhood without falling down." They did as he wished, and when Tom had said goodbye to his father, they went away with him. They walked on till it was twilight, and the little man said, "You must lift me down." "Stay where you are," answered the man on whose head he sat. "No," said Tom, "I will come down. Lift me down immediately." And the man reached up his hand and smashed Tom and killed him. Then Michael Myers stepped out of the shadows and killed the man for killing Tom Thumb. The end. The Clever Gretel. There once was a cook named Gretel who wore shoes with red knots, and when she went out with them on, she used to turn about this way and that way, and then say to herself quite contentedly, "Ah, you are a very pretty girl." And when she came home, she drank a glass of wine for joy. And as the wine made her wish to eat, she used to taste of the best, and she had an excuse herself. And as the wine made her wish to eat, she used to taste of the best, and she had an excuse by herself by saying, "The cook ought to know how to make her cooking tastes." One day it happened that her master came and said to her, "Gretel, this evening a guest is coming, so cook me 2 fowls very nicely." "I will do it directly, master," replied Gretel. She soon killed the fowls, plucked and dressed and spitted them, and as the evening came on she put them before the fire to roast. They began to turn brown and to cook through, but still the guest had not arrived. Then Gretel said to his master, "If your guest does not come soon, I shall have to take the fowls from the fire. But it will be a great shame not to eat them soon while they are very juicy." The master said, "I will run out myself and bring the guest home." And as soon as he had turned his back, Gretel took the spit with the 2 fowls off the fire and thought to herself, "Ah, I have stood so long before the fire that I am quite hot and thirsty. Who knows when he will come? Meanwhile, I will run down into the cellar and have a draught." Gretel ran down the stairs and set down a jug and saying, "God bless you, Gretel," and took a good pull at the beer. And when that was done, she had another draught. She went up again and placed the fowls before the fire and turned the spit around quite merrily, first spreading some butter over their skins. But the roasted fowls smelled so good that Gretel thought they had better be tasted now, and so she dipped her finger into the gravy and said, "Ah, how good these fowls are! It is a sin and shame that they should not be eaten at once." She ran to the window, therefore, to see if her master was yet coming with his guest, but there was nobody. And she turned again to the fowls. "Ah, one wing is burnt," said she. "I'd better eat that." Cutting it off, she ate it. But then she thought, "I better take the other one too, or master will see that something is wanting." When she finished the 2 wings, she went again to see whether her master was coming, but without success. "Who knows," said she, "whether they will come or not? Perhaps they had stopped along the way. Well, Gretel, be of good courage. The one fowl is begun. Have another drink, and then eat it up completely. For when it is eaten, you will be at rest. And besides, why should good things be allowed to spoil?" So thinking, Gretel ran once more into the cellar, took a hearty drink, and then ate up one fowl with great pleasure. As soon as it was down and the master still had not returned, Gretel looked at the other fowl and said, "Where the one is, the other ought to be also. The two belong with one another. What is right for the one is right for the other. I believe that another draught would not harm me." So saying, she took another hearty drink, and let the second fowl slip down after the other. Just as she was enjoying the eating, the master came running up and called, "Make haste, Gretel, the guest is coming directly." "Yes, master," said she, "it will soon be ready." The master went in to see if the table were properly laid, and taking up the great knife wherewith he was to carve the fowls, he began to sharpen it on the stones. Meantime, the guest came and knocked politely at the door. Gretel ran to see who it was, and when she perceived the guest, she held her finger to her mouth to enjoin silence, and said, "Hasten quickly away. If my master discovers you here, you are lost. He certainly did invite you to. He certainly did invite you here to supper, but he has it in mind to cut off your ears. Just listen to how he's sharpening his knife. Just listen to how he is sharpening his knife." The guest listened to the sound and then hurried down the steps as fast as he could, while Gretel ran screaming to her master and said to him, "Surely you have invited a fine guest." "What?" he said. "What do you mean?" "Why," replied Gretel, "just as I was about to serve them up, your guest took the two fowls off the dish and bolted away with them." "That is fine manners, certainly," said the master, grieved for his fine fowls. "He might have left me one of them at least to eat, so that I might have something to eat." Then he called after his guest to stop, who pretended not to hear him. Then he ran after him, knife in hand, calling out, "Only one, only one," meaning that his guest should leave one fowl behind him and not take both. But the latter supposed that his host meant that he would cut off only one ear, and so he ran on as if there were fire at his heels, so that he might take both ears home with him. Meanwhile, Michael Myers came up out of the wine cellar and killed Gretel for being such a lying peasant. The 6 servants. A long time ago there lived an old queen who was also an enchantress, and her daughter was the most beautiful creature under the sun. But the old woman was forever thinking how to lure men to their death. Every suitor, therefore, who came was compelled, before he would marry the daughter, to perform a task which the old woman set, and which was always so difficult that it could not be accomplished. And then the unfortunate lover received no mercy, but was forced to kneel down and have his head struck off. Many a poor youth had been thus destroyed, for the maiden was very pretty. Yet a certain king's son was found who made up his mind to brave the danger. He had heard of the great beauty of the princess, and he prayed his father to let him go and win her. "Never," replied the king. "If you go away, you will go to die." At this answer the son fell sick unto death, and so continued for 7 years, for no physician could do him any good. At last, when the father saw all hope was gone, he said to his son, "Go now and try your fortune, for I know not how else to restore you." As soon as the prince heard these words, he jumped from his bed and felt new strength and vigor return to him, and made ready for his journey. As soon as he set off, he rode up to a man in a blue jumpsuit and wearing a mask. It was Michael Myers. Michael Myers killed the prince, and thus there was nothing to go and try the hand of the princess for. The end. Frederick and Catherine. There was once a man called Frederick who had a wife whose name was Catherine, and they had not long been married. One day Frederick said, "Kate, I am now going to plow. When I come back I shall be hungry, so let me have something nice cooked and a good draught of ale." "Very well," said she, "it shall all be ready." When dinner time drew nigh, and Catherine took a nice sausage, which was all the meat she had, and put it on the fire to fry. The sausage soon began to look brown and to crackle in the pan, and Catherine stood by with a fork and turned it. Then she said to herself, "The sausage is almost ready. I may as well go to the cellar for the ale." So she left the pan on the fire, took a large jug, and went into the cellar and tapped the ale cask. The beer ran into the jug, and Catherine stood looking on. At last it popped into her head, "The dog upstairs is not shut up. He may be running away with the sausage. It's lucky I thought of that." So she ran from the cellar, and sure enough the rascally cur had got the sausage in his mouth and was dragging it away on the ground. Michael Myers was walking up to the front door at the time, and when the dog ran through the front door, he slashed his throat with his chef's knife, and away ran Catherine, looking for her husband. The end. Snow White and Rose Red. There once was a poor widow who lived alone in her hut with her 2 children, who were called Snow White and Rose Red, because they were like the flowers which bloomed on 2 rose bushes which grew before the cottage. These 2 children were as good, happy, industrious, and amiable as any in the world, and only Snow White was more beautiful, was more quiet. Only Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red would run and jump about the meadows, seeking flowers and catching butterflies, while Snow White sat at home, helping her mother to keep house, or reading to her if there was nothing else to do. The 2 children loved each other so dearly that they always walked hand in hand when they went out together, and when Snow White said, "We would never separate from each other," Rose Red replied, "Not so long as we live." And with that, Michael Myers came out from behind the tree and killed both Snow White and Rose Red. Not so long as we live. Wasn't very long. The end. The 4 Accomplished Brothers. There was once a poor man who had 4 sons, and when they were grown up he was told that they must now make their own way in the world. "I have nothing to give you," he said, so you must each go out among strangers and learn the trade." So the 4 brothers took their walking staffs, and bidding their father goodbye, went out through the gate of the town together. The first man they came across was Michael Myers, who killed all 4 of the brothers. The end. The Giant with the 3 Golden Hairs. There was once upon a time a poor woman whose son was born with a caul, and so it was foretold of him that in his 14th year he should marry the king's daughter. As it happened, the king soon after came into the village quite unknown to anyone. When he asked the people what news there was, they answered, "A few days since the child was born with a caul, which is a sure sign that he will be very lucky, and indeed it has been foretold of him that in his 14th year he will marry the king's daughter." Well, the king had a wicked heart, and was disturbed concerning this prophecy. So he went to the parents and said to them in a very friendly manner, "Let me have your child, poor people, and I will take care of him." At first they refused, but when the stranger offered them much gold, they at last consented and gave him the child, thinking, "It is a luck child, and therefore everything must go well for it." The king laid the child in a box and rode away till he came to a deep water. Then he threw the box into it, saying to himself, "From this unsought-for bridegroom have I now freed my daughter." The box, however, did not sink, but floated along like a boat, and not one drop of water came into it. At last it floated down to a mill 2 miles from the king's palace, and there at the mill dam it came to a halt. The miller's servant boy was by good luck standing there and noticed it. and drew it ashore with a hook, thinking he had found a great treasure. When, however, he opened the box, he saw a beautiful child, alive and merry. He took it to the miller and his wife, who had no children, and so adopted it for their own, saying, "God has sent it to us." They took good care of the foundling, and it grew up to be a good steady lad. It happened one day that the king went into the mill for shelter during a thunderstorm and asked the mill people if the tall boy was their child. "No," they answered, "he is a foundling who 14 years ago floated into our dam in a box, and the servant boy drew him out of the water." The king then knew that it was none other than the luck child he had thrown into the water, and so said to them, "Good people, could not the youth carry a letter to my wife, the queen? If so, I will give you 2 pieces of gold for a reward." "As our lord the king commands," they replied, and told the youth to be ready. Then the king wrote a letter to the queen and said, "As soon as this boy arrives with this letter, let him be killed and buried. All must be done before I return." The youth set out on his journey with the letter, but he lost his path, and at evening came to a great forest. In the darkness he saw a small light, and going up to it he found a cottage, into which he went and saw an old woman sitting alone by the fire. Upon seeing the boy, she was terror-stricken and exclaimed, "From whence do you come, and whither are you going?" "I come from the mill," he said, "and I wish to find the queen, to whom I am taking this letter. But as I have lost my way in this forest, I wish to pass the night here." "Poor boy," said the woman, "you have come to a robber's den, who will murder you when they come home." "Let whoever will come," he said. "I am not afraid. I am so weary that I can go no farther." And stretched himself upon a bench, he went to sleep. A little later the robbers came in, and asked angrily what strange lad was lying there. "Ah," said the old woman, "it is an innocent boy who has lost his way in the forest, and out of pity I have taken him in. He has with him a letter to the queen." The robbers opened the letter and read it, and understood that as soon as the youth arrived he was to be put to death. Then the robbers also felt pity for him, and the captain tore up the letter and wrote another, saying that the youth, when he arrived, was to be married to the king's daughter. Then they let him sleep quietly on the bench till the morning, and when he woke they gave him the letter and showed him the right way. When the queen received the letter, she did as it commanded, and a splendid marriage feast prepared. And the king's daughter was given in marriage to the luck child. And as he was both young and handsome, she lived with him in peace and joy. A little later the king came back to his palace and saw that the prophecy was fulfilled, and his daughter was married to the luck child. "How did this come to pass?" he said. "In my letter I gave another command." Then the queen handed him the letter that he might see for himself what was written. The king then saw that it had been exchanged for the other, and he asked the youth what had become of the letter entrusted to him. "I know nothing about it," he answered. "It must have been changed in the forest when I passed in the night." In a great rage the king said, "You shall not escape so easily. He who would have my daughter must fetch for me 3 golden hairs from the head of the giant. Bring me what I desire, then you shall receive my daughter." Well, this was an untenable act, and the little boy had grown up in enough sorrow. So Michael Myers showed up, and he killed the king, and then the boy no longer needed to seek out the giant. The end. How 6 traveled through the world. There was once a man who understood all matter of arts. He had served in the army, where he had behaved very bravely. But when the war came to an end, he received his discharge and 3 farthings for his services. "Wait a bit, this does not please me," said he. "If I find the right people, I will make the king give me the treasures of the whole kingdom." Thereupon, inflamed in rage and anger, he went into a forest, where he found a man who had just uprooted 6 trees as if they were straw, and said to him, "Will you be my servant and travel with me?" "Yes," replied the man, "but I will first take home to my mother this bundle of sticks." And taking up one of the trees, he wound it around the other 5, and raising the bundle upon his shoulder, he bore it away. Then he returned, and his master said to him, "We too should travel well through the world." They had not gone far before they came up with a hunter who was kneeling upon one knee, and preparing to take aim with his gun. The master asked what he was going to shoot, and he replied, 2 miles from hence sits a fly upon the branch of an oak tree, whose left eye I wish to shoot out." "Oh, come with me," said the man. "If we three are together, we can pass easily through the world." The huntsman consented and went with him, and soon they arrived at 7 windmills, whose sails were going round at a great speed. Although right or left, there was no wind nor a leaf stirring. At this sight the man said, "I wonder what drives these mills, for there is no breeze." They went on, but they had not traveled more than 2 miles when they saw a man sitting up in a tree, who held one nostril shut while he blew out through the other. "Good gracious," said our hero, "what are you doing up there?" "Did you not see," replied the man, 2 miles from hence 7 windmills? It is upon those which I am blowing, that the sails may go around." "Oh, then come with me," said our hero, "for if 4 people like us travel together, we shall soon get through the world." So the blower got up and accompanied him, and in a short while they met with another man standing upon one leg, who had unbuckled the other leg and laid it by his side. The leader of the others said, "You have done this, no doubt, to rest yourself?" "Yes," replied the man. "I am a runner, and to keep myself from running along too quickly, I have unbuckled one of my legs. For when I run with both, I go faster than a bird can fly." "Well, then come with me," said our hero. 5 men such as we are will soon get through the world." The 5 went on together, and soon met a man who had a hat on, which he wore quite over one ear. The captain of the other said to him, "Manners, manners, don't hang your hat on one side like that. You look like a simpleton." "I dare not wear my hat straight," said the other, "for if I do, there will come so sharp a frost that the birds in the sky will freeze and fall dead upon the ground." "Then come with me," said our hero. "It would be odd if 6 fellows like us cannot travel quickly through the world." These 6 new companions went into a city where the king had proclaimed that whoever should run a race with his daughter and bear away the prize should become her husband, but if he lost the race, he should also lose his head. This was mentioned to our hero, who said that he would have his servant run for him, but the king told him that in that case he must agree that his servant's life, as well as his own, should be sacrificed if the wager were lost. To this he agreed, and then he bade his runner buckle on his other leg, and told him to be careful and to make sure of winning. The wager was that whoever first brought back water from a distant spring should be victor. So the runner and the princess both received a cup, and they both began to run at the same moment. But the princess had not run many steps before the runner was quite out of sight, and it seemed as if but a puff of wind had passed. In a short time he came to the spring, filled his cup, and turned back again. But now he did not go very far before he felt tired and set his cup down and lay down to take a nap. He made a pillow of a horse's skull which lay upon the ground, thinking from its being hard that he was soon awake. Meanwhile the princess, who was a better runner than many of the men at court, had arrived at the spring and was returning with a cup of water, when she perceived her opponent lying asleep. In great joy she exclaimed, "My enemy is given into my own hands," and emptying his cup she ran on further still. All would now have been lost if by good luck the huntsman had not been standing upon the top of the castle, looking with sharp eyes. When he saw the princess was gaining the advantage, he loaded his gun and shot so cleverly that he carried away the horse's skull under the runner's head without doing the man any injury. This awoke him, and jumped up, and he found his cup and its princess already far in advance. However, he did not lose courage, but ran back to the spring, and again filling his cup, returned home 10 minutes earlier than his opponent. "Behold," said he, "only now I have used my legs. What I did before would not be called running." The king was disgusted, and his daughter not less, that a common soldier should carry off the prize. So they took counsel on how they should get rid of him and his companions. At last the king said, "Do not distress yourself, my dear. I have found a way to prevent their return." Then he called the 6 travelers and said to them, "You must now eat and drink and be merry." And he led them into a room with a floor of iron, doors of iron, and the windows guarded with iron bars. In the room was a table set with choice delicacies, and the king invited them to enter and refresh themselves. As soon as they were inside, he locked and bolted all the doors. Then he sent for the cook and commanded him to keep a fire lighted beneath the room till the iron was red hot. The cook obeyed, and the 6 champions, sitting at the table, soon began to feel warm, and at first they thought it was the result of the hearty eating. But as it kept getting warmer and warmer, they rose to leave the room and found the doors and windows all fast. Then they perceived that the king had some wicked design in hand and wished to suffocate them. But he shall not succeed, cried the man with the hat. I will summon such a frost as shall put to shame and crush this fire. And so saying, he set his hat on straight, and immediately such a frost fell that all the heat disappeared, and even the meats upon the dishes began to freeze. When 2 hours had passed, the king thought they would be stifled, and he caused the door to be opened and went in himself to see after them. But as soon as the door was opened, Michael Myers stood there and killed the king. The six champions got away and lived happily ever after. The end. Hansel and Gretel. Close to a large forest there lived a woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel, and the girl was called Gretel. They were always very poor and had very little to live on. And at one time, when there was famine in the land, he could no longer procure daily bread. One night when he lay in bed worrying over his troubles, he sighed and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we have nothing for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Tomorrow morning we will take the children out quite early into the thickest part of the forest. We will light a fire and give each of them a piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They won't be able to find their way back, and so we shall be rid of them." "Nay, wife," said the man, "we won't do that. I could never find it in my heart to leave my children alone in the forest. The wild animals will soon tear them to pieces." "What a fool you are," she said. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well plane the boards of our coffins at once." She gave him no peace till he consented. "But I grieve over the poor children all the same," said the man. The 2 children could not go to sleep for hunger either, and they heard what their stepmother said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and said, "All is over with us now." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Don't cry. I will find some way out of it." When the old people had gone to sleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door, and slipped out. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles around the house shone like newly minted coins. Hansel stooped down and put as many into his pockets as they would hold. But when he got back to the front door, there was Michael Myers. Michael went in and killed the mother and father, and thus there was no reason for them to go into the forest. The end. The 12 Huntsmen. There was once a prince who was betrothed to a maiden, the daughter of a king, whom he loved very much. One day when they were together and very happy, a messenger came from the prince's father, who was lying ill, to summon him home as he wished to see him before he died. He said to his beloved, "I must go away and leave you now, but I give you this ring as a keepsake. When I am king, I will come and fetch you away." Then he rode off, and when he got home he found his father on his deathbed. His father said, "My dear son, I wanted to see you once more before I die. Promise to marry the bride I have chosen for you," and he named a certain princess. The son was so sad that without reflecting he promised to do what his father wished, and thereupon the king closed his eyes and died. Now when the prince had been proclaimed king, and the period of mourning was past, the time came when he had to keep his promise to his father. He made his offer to the princess, and it was accepted. His betrothed heard of this and grieved so much over the faithlessness that she very nearly died. The king, her father, asked, "Dear child, why are you so sad? You shall have whatever you desire." She thought for a moment and said, "Dear father, I want 11 maidens, all exactly like me in face, figure, and height." The king said, "If it is possible, your wish shall be fulfilled." Then he caused a search to be made all over his kingdom till he found 11 maidens, all exactly like his daughter. The princess ordered 12 huntsmen's dresses to be made, in which she commanded the maidens to wear, putting on the 12th herself. She then took leave of her father and rode away with the maidens to the court of her former bridegroom, whom she loved so dearly. She asked him if he wanted any huntsmen, and whether he would take them all into his service. The king did not recognize her, but as they were all so handsome, he said yes, he would engage them. So they all entered the king's service. Now the king had a lion which was a wonderful creature, for he knew all secret and hidden things. He said to the king one evening, "You fancy you have 12 huntsmen here, don't you? Yes, said the king. You are mistaken, said the lion. They are 12 maidens. The king answered, This can't be true. How can you prove it? I will have some peas strewn in your anteroom tomorrow, and you will see. Men have a firm tread, and when they walk on the peas don't move. But the maidens trip and trot and slide, and make the peas roll about. The king was pleased with the lion's advice, and ordered the peas to be strewn on the floor. There was, however, a servant of the king who favored the huntsmen. When he heard they were to be put to this test, he went and told them all about it. He said, The lion is going to prove to the king that you are maidens. The princess thanked him, and afterwards to her maidens, Do your utmost to tread firmly upon the peas. Next morning, when the king ordered them to be called, they walked into the antechamber with so firm a tread that not a pea moved. When they had gone away, the king said to the lion, You lied, they walked just like men. But the lion answered, They had been warned of the test and were prepared for it. Just let 12 spinning wheels be brought into the antechamber, and they will be delighted at the sight, as no man would be. This plan also pleased the king, and he ordered the spinning wheels. But again the kind servant warned the huntsmen of the plan. When they were alone, the princess said to her maidens, Control yourselves, and don't so much as look at the spinning wheels. When the king the next morning sent for the huntsmen, they walked through the antechamber without even glancing at the spinning wheels. Then the king said to the lion, You lied to me. They are men. They never looked at the spinning wheels. The lion answered, They knew that they were on trial and restrained themselves. But the king would not believe him any more. The 12 huntsmen always went with the king on his hunting expeditions, and the longer he had them, the better he liked them. Now it happened one day when they were out hunting that the news came of the royal bride's approach. When the true bride heard it, the shock was so great that her heart nearly stopped, and she fell down in a dead faint. The king, thinking something had happened to his favorite huntsman, ran to help him and pulled off his glove. Then he saw the ring which he had given to his first betrothed, and when he looked at her face, he recognized her. He was so moved that he kissed her, and when she opened her eyes, he said, Thou art mine, and I am thine, and nobody in the world shall separate us. Then he sent a messenger to the other bride and begged her to go home, as he already had a wife, and he who has an old dish does not need a new one. The marriage was then celebrated, and the lion was taken into favor again, because, after all, he had spoken the truth. Meanwhile, Michael Myers just stood around wondering who he should kill, but there wasn't anybody to kill this time. The end. Faithful John. There was once an old king who, having fallen sick, thought to himself, This is very likely my deathbed on which I am lying. Then he said, Let Faithful John be sent for. Faithful John was his best beloved servant, and was so called because he had served the king faithfully all his life long. When he came near the bed, the king said to him, Faithful John, I feel my end is drawing near, and my only care is for my son. He is yet of tender years, and does not always know how to shape his conduct. And unless you promise me to instruct him in all his actions, and be a true foster father to him, I shall not be able to close my eyes in peace. Then answered Faithful John, I will never forsake him, and I will serve him faithfully, even though it should cost me my life. And the old king said, Then I die, being of good cheer and at peace, and went on to say, After my death you must lead him through all the whole castle, into all the chambers, halls, and vaults. Show him the treasures that in them lie. But the last chamber in the long gallery, in which lies hidden the picture of the princess of the golden palace, you must not show him. If he were to see that picture, he would directly fall into a great love for her, that he would faint with the strength of it, and afterwards, for her sake, he would run into great danger, so you must guard him well. And as Faithful John gave him his hand upon it, the old king became still and silent, and laid his head upon the pillow and died. When the old king was laid in the grave, Faithful John told the young king that he was promised to his father on his deathbed, and said, I will certainly hold to my promise and be faithful to you, as I was faithful to him, even though it should cost me my life. When the days of mourning were at end, Faithful John said to the prince, It is now time that you should see your inheritance. I will show you all the paternal castle. Then he led him over all the castle, upstairs and downstairs, and showed him all the treasures in the splendid chambers. One chamber only he did not open, in which the perilous picture hung. Now the picture was so placed that when the door opened, it was the first thing to be seen. and it was so wonderfully painted that it seemed to breathe and move. In the whole world there was nothing more lovely or more beautiful. The young king noticed how faithful John always passed by this one door and asked, "Why do you not undo this door?" "There is something inside that would terrify you," answered he. But the king answered, "I have seen the whole castle, and I would know what is in here also." And he went forward and tried to open the door by force. Then faithful John called him back and said, "I promised your father on his deathbed that you should not see what is in that room. It might bring great misfortune on you and me, were I tried to break my promise." But the young king answered, "I shall be undone if I do not go inside that room. I shall have no peace day or night until I have seen it with my own eyes, and I will not move from this place until you have unlocked it." Then faithful John saw that there was no help for it, and he chose out the key from the big bunch with a heavy heart and many sighs. When the door was open, he walked in first. Inside was Michael Myers. Michael Myers immediately killed the king and faithful John for having stepped inside the forbidden room. The end. Iron Hans. There was once a king whose castle was surrounded by a forest full of game. One day he sent a huntsman out to shoot a deer, but he never came back. "Perhaps an accident has happened to him," said the king. Next day he sent out 2 more huntsmen to look for him, but they did not return either. On the 3rd day he sent for all his huntsmen and said to them, "Search the whole forest without ceasing until you have found all 3. Not a single man of all these, nor one of the pack of hounds they took with them, ever came back. From this time forth, no one would venture into the forest, and so there it lay, wrapped in silence and solitude, with only an occasional eagle or hawk circling over it. This continued for several years, and then one day a strange huntsman sought an audience of the king and offered to penetrate into the dangerous wood. The king, however, would not give him permission and said, "It is not safe, and I am afraid if you go in that you will never come out again, any more than all the others." The huntsman answered, "Sire, I would take the risk upon myself. I do not know fear." So the huntsman went into the wood with his dog. Before long, the dog had started up some game and wanted to chase it, but hardly had he taken a few steps when he came to a deep pool and could not go any farther. A naked arm appeared out of the water, seized him, and drew him down. When the huntsman saw this, he went back and fetched 3 men with pails to empty the pool. When they got to the bottom, they found a wild man. His body was as brown as rusty iron, and his hair hung down over his face to his knees. They bound him with cords and carried him away to the castle. There was great excitement over the wild man, and the king had an iron cage made for him in the courtyard. He forbade anyone to open the door of the cage on pain of death, and the queen had to keep the key in her own charge. After this, anybody could walk into the forest with safety. The king had a little son 8 years old, and one day he was playing in the courtyard. In his play, his golden ball fell into the cage. The boy ran up and said, "Give me back my ball." "Not if you will open the door," said the wild man. "No, I can't do that," said the boy. "My father has forbidden it." Then he ran away. Next day he came again and asked for his ball. The man said, "Open my door," but he would not. On the 3rd day the king went out hunting, and the boy came again and said, "Even if I would, I could not open the door. I have not got the key." Then the wild man said, "It is lying under your mother's pillow. You can easily get it." The boy, who was very anxious to have his ball back, threw his scruples to the winds and fetched the key. The door was very stiff, and he pinched his fingers in opening it. As soon as it was open, the wild man came out, gave the boy his ball, and hurried away. The boy was now very frightened and cried out, "Oh, wild man, don't go away, or I shall be beaten." The wild man turned back, picked up the boy, put it on his shoulder, and walked hurriedly off into the wood. When the king came home, he saw at once the empty cage and asked the queen how it had come about. She knew nothing about it and went to look for the key, which was of course gone. They called the boy, but there was no answer. The king sent people out into the fields to look for him, but all was in vain. He was gone. The king easily guessed what had happened, and great grief fell on the royal household. When the wild man got back into the depths of the dark forest, he took the boy down off his shoulder and said, "You will never see your father and mother again, but I will keep you here with me because you had pity on me and set me free. If you do as you were told, you will be well treated. I have treasures and gold enough to spare, more than anybody in the world. He made a bed of moss for the boy on which he went to sleep. Next morning the man led him to a spring and said, "You see this golden well is clear as crystal? You must sit by it and take care that nothing falls into it, or it will be contaminated. I shall come every evening to see if you obeyed my orders." The boy sat down on the edge of the spring to watch it. Sometimes he would see a golden fish or a golden snake darting through it, and he guarded it well so that nothing should fall into it. One day as he sat sitting like this, his finger pained him so much that involuntarily he dipped it into the water. He drew it out very quickly, but saw that it was gilded, and although he tried hard to clean it, it remained golden. In the evening, Iron Hans came back, looked at the boy, and said, "What has happened to the well today?" Nothing," he answered, keeping his finger behind it, back so that Iron Hans could not see it. But he said, "You have dipped your finger into the water. It does not matter this time, but take care that nothing of the kind occurs again." Early next morning, the boy took a seat by the spring again to watch. His finger still hurt very much, and he put his hand up above his head, but unfortunately in doing so, he brushed a hair into the well. He quickly took it out, but it was already gilded. When Iron Hans came in the evening, he knew very well what had happened. "You have let a hair fall into the well," he said. "I will overlook it once more, but if it happens for the third time, the well will be polluted, and you can no longer stay with me." On the third day, the boy sat again by the well, but he took good care not to move his finger, however much it hurt. The time seemed very long to him, as he looked at the face reflected in the water. As he looked at the face reflected in the water, he saw another face. A man bent over in a blue jumpsuit and a mask. He killed the boy with his chef's knife and waited for the wild man to appear. When the wild man showed up, he killed the wild man as well, thus ending Iron Hans and the loss of the crystal well. The end. The Lady and the Lion. There was once a man who had to take a long journey, and when he was saying goodbye to his daughters, he asked what he should bring back to them. The eldest wanted pearls, the second diamonds, but the third said, "Dear father, I should like a singing, soaring lark." The father said, "Very well, if I can manage it, you shall have it." And he kissed all three and set off. But as he left the room, Michael Myers was standing outside the door and killed their father. Then he killed all three of the girls, so there was nothing left to bring home. The end.